Hi everybody, it's Joe Cioffi here on this Friday. Feeling so-so tonight, but I came equipped with some tissues and a little bit of hot tea. So hopefully that'll keep me going for a little while. I was going to skip it tonight because I'm just not feeling 100%, but I figured let me give it a shot. And let me just right off the bat remind everybody, those of you who are on Long Island, tomorrow at 2 o'clock, I will be at the Lindenhurst Library in Lindenhurst, New York, on Lee Avenue. You can find the information on my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Cioffi. That'll be at 2 p.m. till 3:30, and we will talk about the winter so far and talk about the weather pattern going forward. We'll look at weather models. I'll take your questions. We'll discuss whatever you'd like to discuss when it comes to this sort of stuff. But we always seem to have a good time at these library talks that I give. And if you're on Long Island, that's at the Lindenhurst Library tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay. So, yeah, Anthony, don't bring the MJO up tonight. My head's clogged up to the point where I don't know if I can think straight. But I wanted to kind of touch base with everybody tonight with respect to what's happening as we go through the weekend and into next week. Because we've got this pattern, I'm calling it a realignment. I don't know that the pattern actually really changed very much. Certainly it relaxed from what we saw back from December to mid-January. But one of the things that popped up today, and I want to bring them up front and center here, I'm going to bring the teleconnections up because, you know, there's always volatility with these teleconnections on a day-to-day basis. They're based on the 0Z overnight GFS runs. These are the ensembles, which probably are the better ones to use because they give us a bit of a smoother look, excuse me, in terms of what to expect going forward. And one of the things that we noticed today, right off the bat, is something that we want to pay attention to, and that's the Pacific North America Index. There are two important moves that this index is making. One is from a deeply negative position where it is now to actually spiking slightly positive along about Monday, Tuesday. And this will be coinciding with a wave that is going to be developing in the northeastern Gulf of Mexico. At the same time, you've got the PNA index, the NAO index, which is only very weakly positive, actually goes a little negative right around January 30th, 31st. So this could be playing into this first front and wave that's going to be affecting, I think, primarily the coastal areas of the Northeast, from New Jersey or perhaps even down from Delaware on up into southern New England and Cape Cod. The other important thing here is that the East Pacific Index, the East Pacific Oscillation, which has been forecast to go negative along about right around February 1st, actually goes briefly negative over Sunday and Monday. So you got these changes happening in the indices right around the time when we got this wave, and then a little peak up in positive territory before it plunges, down to sharply negative as we move through the first 8 or 9 days of the month of February. That has not changed at all over the last 4 or 5 days. The EPO forecast has been pretty much the same. So, these indices are kind of flashing signals to us that we're going to go back to a colder weather pattern. Now, whether it winds up, it's hard for me to kind of grasp whether it winds up being just like we had. I tend to think there'll be some similarities, but there might be some differences this time around that we're going to have to examine once we see this whole thing evolve. I'm not 100% sold that it's going to be as cold, or some people are actually saying, I know some people are saying that this will be even colder than the last time, and maybe it will be. I don't know. I'm not in a position to really make that prediction at this point. I think this is one of those things where you're better off just kind of following the trend and let it take you where it needs to go and not try to outguess it. Right now, the west is where most of the action is, where we have a number of winter storm warnings up in a few places in Oregon and Washington State and in parts of Idaho, and also a large area of winter weather advisories in the same zone, as that really is where the action is. One piece of good news is that we do have those red flag warnings for the abnormally dry conditions in the southern plains have diminished somewhat to a small area in northern Texas and in a small portion of Oklahoma in the eastern part of the Panhandle. And also we have a red flag alert for parts of southern California because of the dry conditions there. So there isn't too much happening weather-wise in the east at the moment. Most of the action has been in the west. So I want to take you through a couple of model runs today and show you where this is all going. You know, there's talk of another event at the end of next week. I'm always a firm believer in taking these things one at a time. So here's the situation with the first one. I'm going to start with the GFS model. And here's our weather front. We're going to warm up nicely here in the east tomorrow into the 50s, at least in my neck of the woods, from eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, including Philadelphia and New York City. We do have this trailing front with some showers that will be moving through here early Sunday morning and through about the midday hours. Meanwhile, out in the west, we've got that rain and snow going on in the Pacific Northwest as weather systems are moving in there. So here's that front that moves on through here. We're now at Sunday morning, and now we're at Sunday right around at 1 p.m. If you look down in the northeastern Gulf, you can see where the isobar kind of starts to turn cyclonically. There's a low that's going to develop there in the northeastern Gulf of Mexico and then run up off the Florida coast and then eventually making its way northeastward. This was the late afternoon GFS run. You can see where the low is sitting out roughly at about, I want to just see if I can get a good point value here so we can figure out where the model puts the low. So maybe it looks like at around 39 and 71 or 71 and a half. The northern edge of this is being indicated to be some snow. It might be a little more extensive than this. There is cold air. This high is coming down. You're going to have cold air that's going to be up in eastern Canada and in New England, and some of that's going to try and drain southward. A lot is going to depend really on that low developing. How strong does it get? You know, this is in some ways, if you think back to the storm back on January 4th, one of the reasons why that produced the snow it did was because it was so intense that it just literally caused cold air to collapse and stay collapsed in the northeast and in the mid-Atlantic along the coast. This is not as deep a system, obviously, so it's a little tougher to get cold air down. But when we look at what's going on aloft, and I want to go to the 850, 5,000 foot level in terms of the temperatures here. Let me just pull that up. And where the light blue line ends and you start to get into the greens, that's where the zero line is at 850, the freezing line. So it's actually pretty cold up at 5,000 feet. It's probably the very bottom of the atmosphere that'll be on the warm side, and that can be corrected if we get intensity of precip. So one of the things we're going to watch for is to see if there's any kind of room for this system to be perhaps a little bit stronger than what's being modeled. One of the arguments against that is this trough, which is formidable enough, but it doesn't, you know, you look at this trough, you've got this ridge in the west at this point, Monday afternoon. The problem is that that ridge in the west begins to collapse, and as a result, the trough in the east, rather than lift up and around and lift up northeast, southwest, and northeast, just progresses along west to east. So there's less energy here that gets worked into the system off the east coast. Instead of intensifying, it just kind of holds its own, and then you can see the trough just basically moves along and offshore, and then it's done. The ridge in the west at this point is gone because of what's going on up in the Pacific Northwest. And then as we go through later in the week, the GFS has been telegraphing this deeper trough coming in the east for Friday and Saturday. Now, not all the models are on board with this idea. The European model, for example, has a much flatter look. If you look at the European for the same time, it's much flatter than the GFS. Here's the GFS with that fairly deep trough effect. I'll just, let me go back one day. We'll go to Friday. So this is Friday afternoon with that sharp trough on the GFS, and the European has more of this kind of broad bowl type of a look. The Canadian has a sharper look to it, not maybe a shade less deep than the GFS. One of the things the Canadian does is that it's going to be another one of these things where you have a temperatures are going to try and warm ahead of it. A front is going to try to move by and a wave on it, and models are timing things very differently for the end of the week. We'll bring up the GFS's view, and this is for Groundhog Day, and you can see the frontal boundary is actually into upstate New York, into the Hudson Valley, northeastern Pennsylvania, the low in eastern Tennessee. It basically brings through a strong cold front with rain changing to snow before ending. The Canadian, on the other hand, argues that the front is going to, the high, instead of dropping southward, actually more of the high builds eastward rather than southward, and as a result, the front comes through first. Then the wave goes out, and it has a fairly deep storm sitting east of the Delmarva Peninsula here on next Saturday. I don't know whether I want to believe this. And then you have the Europeans' view, which, because of the flat look, you can barely find a low sitting well east of the North Carolina coast. I mean, it's basically has a cold front that comes through, a wave that develops on it, a weak wave that runs east-northeast, produces a little bit of precip, probably a little snow, and then it's done. So we've got a few things to watch here as we go into the long term. Let me now bring up the snowfall maps because they are pretty interesting. We'll show you the wide view here. I'll bring you out the 10 days. So there's actually, according to the GFS anyway, because of the cold air that's going to be spreading across the U.S. out of Canada, you've got much of the U.S. north of 35 degrees north, actually maybe even a little further south than that, say maybe north of 33 degrees north, getting some snow over the next 10 days. The heaviest snows in the northern Rockies, and also a stripe of heavy snows from the middle Mississippi Valley, across the Ohio Valley, interior areas of the Northeast, Pennsylvania, and on up to upstate New York and into New England. But there's still some snows being generated here on the coast. How it breaks it down, how it's going to wind up ultimately breaking down, I'm not sure. The Canadian, with its stronger storm for the east, has this stripe of 1 foot plus snows, if you want to believe it, from southeastern Pennsylvania and Maryland on up into southern New England. Again, that would have to be predicated on the fact that that front at the end of next week comes through first and then the wave goes by, and not the other way around. In the west, also some ample amounts being indicated, and unfortunately we don't have a European snow map to show you. I'll just go real tight on the northeast, by the way, so you can get a view here. Here's the northeast view on the Canadian for the end of almost all of this. These are ridiculous amounts. You're going to have to really have this thing work out exactly as the model shows, and we know that that's not going to be the case. Here's the GFS. The GFS has actually been a little more consistent with this idea of the front coming with a wave developing on it, and the front, basically, for the most part, the wave goes by, then the front goes through, and it's been doing that for about 4 days now. It really hasn't changed very much in terms of its outlook. The European had that look. Now it's gone to this very flat look. I would say at this point that the European is not the model of choice right now in terms of its performance. It has not done very well at all, as we've pointed out a number of times. So I'm going to come back to you guys right now. I'm sorry, I don't, believe me, I do not have it in me to go on a long, hour-long video tonight. So I'm going to come back to you guys and address some of your questions. And welcome to all of you, by the way, who are new here. Great to have you on board. And please, by all means, your questions and comments are always welcome here. We like to get into a good discussion. Jason Shea, the icon model. Jason, I'll get back to you in a second. Yeah, the Canadian, it's had its moments lately. Why don't we look at the German model? The German model, or the icon model, does not go out far enough on the late afternoon in between run, but at least we can address this first system because late this afternoon the icon did paint a bullish view, for somewhat bullish view. This would be for Monday night and for Tuesday. I'm sorry, for later Monday night into Tuesday. And you can see that it does, 3 to 4 inch snows over a stripe from northern Virginia, southeastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, southern New England, and maybe a little bit more in southeastern New England, and on up through coastal Maine. When we get the surface map up, I'll just get a little bit wider here so we can watch it play out. And so here's the German model. And there's your front for Saturday night into Sunday morning, which really doesn't have too much with it. And here comes your low for Sunday night and Monday. Runs up northeast. And it actually has the surface low pretty far south and east. But because of the structure of the upper air trough still being far enough to the west, it does seem to want to generate that these coastal snows from Delaware through southern New England Monday night into Tuesday morning, and then as the upper trough swings by, the snow gradually ends during Tuesday. The structure of the upper air, one of the things that's happening here is the fact that we have, there's no upper air that we can look at with the German model, but I can tell you what's happening just from respect to the other ones. Not only is this trough not going in negative, it's just kind of progressing along. The actual shortwave trough that is the system in the south, you can barely find it here on the representation of the upper air on the GFS. And one of the arguments over the last couple of days has been whether the northern stream, the northern trough that becomes the dominant player here, does it come down as a separate entity, or does it kind of sort of merge with that southern shortwave that represents the Gulf system? And that is where the models have changed over the last couple of days. It's kind of brought those two together rather than keep them as separate entities. So if we can get this upper trough to be a little bit stronger, like the model had a few days ago, that would bring the cold air in even faster. So there are a lot of tricky things to look at with regards to this. I want to also just now go to the wider view so you can take a look at what happens in the longer term. And I'm also going to go back one run because that matches up better with what those teleconnections showed. So here's our trough that lifts out. Again, the GFS has this very sharp negatively tilted trough for the end of next week, which is, right now we haven't figured out whether that's going to be real or not. And then you'll notice that the flow in Canada, the vortex just basically sits there and rotates around. So as it does so, it's going to be bringing down some colder air masses. But the devil in all of this is going to be in the details. Is it really going to look like that, or is it going to, are we going to have some systems in play here that the model isn't quite seeing? And by the way, one of the things I've been, thinking about with regards to this evolving pattern, that while it is similar to what we had, there are differences. I think there may be differences, and it's quite possible that one of the differences is that we may wind up being even drier than we were the last time, in which case, we will have, cold air and periods of some very cold days, but we might not have the weather systems to work on. And I think that's a distinct possibility and something that we're going to have to consider as we go forward. So let me just say hi to everybody again. Latecomers, thank you for being here. You saw the Canadian model, Matthew Warman, for the next Friday-Saturday storm. Yeah, it did show 20 inches in southern Connecticut, but you know what the odds of that being right now, a week away, are very, very low. So let's kind of discount that at the moment. But we know how it gets there. If if the system at the end of next week evolves to where the front comes through first and then we get a wave on it, then you might be talking about something more important in terms of snow. But that's a big if. That is a very big if. Thank you, Monet a Bear. I hope I said that right. I try to give my my honest opinions about what I think is going to happen. And yes, I don't give fake news, or in this case, fake weather. Christopher, how much snow could fall in Boston Monday into Tuesday? It depends. If that coastal low, it's going to depend on obviously the strength and track of that coastal low. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a big snowfall, but it could be on the order of several inches. We'll tackle that question over the weekend. I'm kind of uncomfortable right now with figuring out snow amounts with that because of the fact that there's still too much flux in the upper air with regards to it. So let's tomorrow. I'll give it my best guess. Jason Schaefer, the Norland trough thing is maybe off the table. If that upper air trough in the west is moving a little bit faster, it might not have any impact on us. It might mean maybe some snow down in parts of, say, eastern Virginia and the Delmarva Peninsula when that moves on through. But Norland troughs are a forecaster's nightmare. Norland troughs are basically troughs that are on the northwestern side of a storm, and they kind of like rotate around the backside of a storm system, and they are extremely difficult to forecast. Models have a terrible time with them. You go from run to run where it's in one place on one run, and then 6 hours later it's in a completely different place on another. My colleague Joe Rayo is popping in.
I didn't even know you were in here.
Oh, I'm doing the YouTube tonight.
Oh, this is YouTube?
This is YouTube.
Oh.
You want to jump in for a little bit?
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was...
Yeah, I only got about...
Well, you're in here talking to all these people. I'm back in the office talking to your dear friend in New Jersey.
Oh, Alan's on the phone.
Yeah, well, he was.
Alan Caspers, who Joe's referring to.
We were talking about like five. He said, "Where's Joe?" I said, "I don't know." And I'm asking him, "Where is Joe?"
No, I just decided I was going to not do the YouTube cast tonight, and then I figured I'd better. There was just too much going on. What are your thoughts about the long range?
I just went through a 10-minute dissertation with Mr. K.
Well, don't take 10 minutes because it's 8:23 Eastern time, and Sir Ivan is going to be clamoring for me in about 6 minutes.
Well,
so we're going to have to make this fast.
As I just said to Mr. Casper, who we've known from the 70s. Are you all clogged?
Yeah. Good morning.
I mean, we used to worship this man when he used to be on Channel 2. But
yes.
But what I said was, the whole earmark of this winter has been storms that are supposed to be way out over there. And with each passing run, they seem to come a little bit closer, Now, I know you're not a big fan of the ensemble. You like the operation.
I've been looking at the ensembles. I noticed that they kind of, they're reeling it in. And has been the trend this year is to have them out there in the ocean, and then they get reeled in by the time we get closer to the event.
And I'm not going to mention anything about sun angle.
No, please don't. You know what? If you keep on your thought, I'm going to see if the Le plumes are up.
Oh, dear me. Well, as to me, it looks like we have a shot for something later on Friday into Friday night. In fact, you know, if you took a consensus of the GFS and the NAM at 12Z, the afternoon run, you might argue that we could even see some precipitation. It might even be in the form of wet snow as early as Monday morning. But it looks
Right.
like whatever is going to come our way would be, for the most part, the lion's share of it would be later Monday into Monday night. And for the folks who live out on Long Island and New York City and coastal New Jersey, it seems like they have a better shot. Although the lower Hudson Valley, that's my territory here at FiOS 1, would be in it too. But it looks like if you really wanted to see something in terms of measurable precipitation, it would happen in places to the south and to the east, closer to the path of this coastal wave or coastal storm.
All right.
And then it turns very cold. It's another sharp drop in terms of temperature and also in terms of wind. It looks like we have a biting, bitter, blustery day coming up on Tuesday. Everything calms out as high pressure builds over us on Wednesday. And then we watch for the next system, which will come our way at the end of next week. Next Friday, it looks like initially it's going to be rain, but then a punch of cold air coming in from behind it, and whether or not some kind of a system develops on that front, which may bring us an enhancement of the precipitation and may bring in enough cold air to change it over to snow either Friday night, next Friday night, or early on Saturday. So we have two systems. If you're into dynamic meteorology, if you're into whether or not we're going to see snow and or rain or whatever, we have two systems warming up in the bullpen, so to speak, later Monday and Monday night, and again a week from now
Right.
on Friday. And
Joshua Pan hopes Monday night for Tuesday in Fairfax County because they want to be off from school. Joshua, you do your homework and assume that school is going to be open, okay? Because we all know that I don't have anything to do with all of that. But I would not bet on schools being closed at this stage of the game. By the way, I did look at the SREF plumes. They actually came up a little bit. Looks like they give a couple of inches to Long Island, New York City, to about White Plains, and northeast New Jersey, then, and a little bit less as we go north and west. They've been kind of trending a little higher over the last 24 hours. So we'll see what happens when we get to tomorrow.
I hope your voice is going to be better for your big talk tomorrow out on Long Island.
Yeah, I mentioned it at the very top. So for the latecomers, I'll mention it again. We have I'll be at the Lindenhurst Library tomorrow at 2 o'clock on Long Island, Lindenhurst, New York. It's very easy to get to if you're out there just off Sunrise Highway and you head south into the village, and it's just keep going a little bit further south on I believe it's Wellwood Avenue, and it's right off Wellwood Avenue. So come on out at 2 o'clock. Should have a nice crowd there, and we usually have a lot of fun at these things. I may actually even try and live stream that on YouTube while I'm there, if I can get somebody to help me out with that. So maybe we can get the live stream of the Lindenhurst talk on my YouTube channel.
Normally, I would say I'll be there with bells on. I was a resident of Long Island for many, many years in wonderful Levittown, and before that, Franklin Square. However, I have been putting this off now for the umpteenth number of weekends. Believe it or not, we still have our Christmas tree and our Christmas decorations.
You and a lot of other people.
Still up. Not outside. Outside, I took care of. I took good full advantage of that mild stretch last weekend. But now we still have the Gigunda tree and all of the Christmas. And you know, quite frankly, I'd leave it up.
Like I told you, in a very short time, people will be complimenting you on the fact that you're getting ahead of the curve for next Christmas.
Good.
By the way, Joseph Mayano, this is ginger tea, lemon ginger tea, okay? And I had my vitamin C today as well, so, you know, I actually don't feel too bad. It's just kind of got some pressure around the top of my head. Corey Bodziak, I'm going to try tomorrow. If I can get somebody to help me out with my the camera part of it with my phone, I might be able to pull this off. So no guarantees from the management, but if I can do it, it'll start at 2 o'clock, and I'll probably be able to get some questions from you guys too. So if I can work out those angles, we'll see. And we'll live stream tomorrow. I'll try and live stream tomorrow night, depending on one thing or another. Weekends are always kind of tough in terms of trying to give you a time ahead of time. But we'll do the best. I will do the best that I can, depending on how I feel. And I got to say goodnight because it's time for.
Okay.
I got to start going and do a few things.
Gargle.
Yes. Thanks so much for being here, everybody. By the way, just really fast, my channel made the list of the top 60 YouTube weather channels, which I'm number 30. I'm exactly in the middle. So my website is number 47 of the list of 100. My YouTube channel is number 30 on a list of 60, and it would not be there if it were not for you folks at home that are watching right now. Thank you so very much for making this a big success, and hopefully we will make it an even bigger success as we go forward. Have a great evening and a great weekend, and again, watch tomorrow. Hopefully I'll be able to live stream from the Lindenhurst Library. Good night.
Nighty-night.